what did you want to portray with your Doctor? Because he has quite a change throughout his series. He starts off as there's a bit more of the comedy in it, I think. He's quite bumbling. And then towards your third series, he becomes a lot darker.
You noticed? Yes, well, I mean, when I said earlier, when I got Doctor Who, I'd not seen it for years, and I had no real idea what it was about. But as I was I'm a comedic actor, I arrived with my bag of tricks, really. So that's how I brought to it originally. And it was then I started to realize that, as I said earlier, this was an amazing part. You could do anything with it. I also thought that there was too much known about the Doctor. The mystery had gone. And I wanted to bring that back. I wanted to bring back the mystery. As luck would have it, the script editor, Andrew Cartmel, he was Canadian, and as luck had it, he didn't know much about Doctor Who either. So both of us didn't know much about it, and I think that was a blessing for us in a way. We didn't have all that baggage of behind, and we weren't constrained, and so we kind of just started. We moved it, from one kind of. It was more cartoon-like in its way, in a sense, brilliantly, beautifully, wonderfully, entertainingly. But we took it into something with more depth. And Stephen Moffat, I was dining with him once, and at the beginning of it, he arrived as the producer, the great producer, and then as the evening progressed, he turned into a fanboy. And then he told me something that I hadn't realized we were doing. We just did it because we were ignorant. Was that we'd given it a depth and a more three-dimensional kind of path, which then eventually got carried on into Christopher Eccleston and the rest of them, which delighted me. I had no idea we'd done that. We just did our interpretation of the Doctor, and he got darker. At the same time, my grandmother got to be 100, and that was way back in the 80s, and that wasn't very common. And I went to see her, and I realized my Doctor was 970 years old. He was old. And my grandmother, she was very compos mentis, she was fit, but she was fed up. 100, she'd been born in the Crimean War. I mean, all the wars she'd seen, and of course all the wars the Doctor's seen. She'd lived and she'd lost people. All the people the Doctor had lost, that came to me as well. And she'd lost people she'd loved dearly, and she'd outlived friends, and she'd become kind of lonely, and as well. And so I thought, I've got to bring that to the Doctor. So that was where that came. So there was the mystery. I wanted to bring back the mystery, and then the longevity, the seriousness, and also the sadness, as well as keeping the comedy. That was so important. My own vanity, in a way, as an actor, was to juggle all these balls, to keep them all going, to be able to play them. And it made me excited and to do that. And hopefully, I think, the excitement came through, down the camera and into the TV sets, I hope. So that was the journey that I was on with the Doctor. And of course, then the way to achieve it, was to maybe, you had to doubt the Doctor in some ways, And at the same time, but when Bonnie left and Sophie arrived as Ace, I had this thought that when we weren't on the screen, we were out I was taking it on the University of the Universe, so that as we traveled, she would become, because she was a street urchin type of child, and then would develop into a much more thinking, I was, educating her in a way. That was another thing to make her, and also incredibly selfish at the same time, because as Doctor Who, one had to learn very complicated speeches full of science fiction gobbledygook, and it was mind-bending. So I thought eventually, and we did achieve it, I could start off the thing and then turn to Ace and said, and what do you think? And she'd have to finish it off. So that was a selfish thing. But that was that was kind of the jigsaw that I was building up my Doctor on as well. And that was it really. I think of all the bits and the spoons.
And the spoon, can't forget the spoons.
Can't forget the spoons. They became part of it.
What was it like working with Sophie? What was your relationship like?
Oh, it was great. I mean, it was, as I said, it was lovely working with Bonnie earlier, but Sophie arrived and we just hit it off like that. She had the same philosophy, the same politics, the same kind of sense of humor. She used to laugh at all my jokes, and 35, 40, nearly many years later, she's still laughing at them. And so we got on really well. We became great friends, great mates, really.
Well, in 1989, of course, then Doctor Who was put on a break, I think it was called at the time, and then it became clear it was a cancellation.
They put it on a hiatus. Yes, that was really disappointing because it had gone through, it was in a dip. What had happened was that the powers that be and up in the offices above had fallen out of love with it. There were lots of reasons, but one of the reasons was, at the BBC, unlike the ITV, you make your name by becoming a producer of something new. At ITV, you can carry on making your name by taking over a successful thing and keeping it going, because that's a monetary world. But in the BBC, it's a bit different. So Doctor Who had been on coming up to 30 years, and Verity Lambert had made her name, but no one else had made their name in a slot like that. So one of the things they wanted to do is to get rid of it so they could bring in their own new thing and make their name. Do you see that logic? That was one of the logics. Many other things as well. But they'd fallen out of love with it. We were up against Coronation Street. And at that time, it was the beginning of Coronation Street. Used to go out just once a week. And they started to go out twice a week. And then I think eventually three times a week. And the BBC put us up against it to try and, kind of diminish it. But funnily enough, when we were up against Coronation, we got 7 million when Coronation Street was on. 7 million. And they weren't counting VCRs then. They were just coming in. So there were 7 million people watching it, and then there were 7 million children upstairs watching it. And also the Doctor Who magazine was beginning to get, it was healthy. It was on the up. Everyone said it was on the up. But as I said earlier, but for political reasons, the various reasons, they wanted to get rid of it, so they put it into a hiatus and then forgot to bring it back for 9 years. John Nathan Turner phoned me up. We'd finished, and it was now in 1990, and it was in the summer, and John phoned me up and said, "Oh, I'm just phoning up to say I'm sending you a letter." I said, "All right, okay." Eccentric thing to do. And he said, "I suppose I better read it to you." I said, "Well, yes. Although why did you send it in the first place?" Anyway, he opened the letter and told me that was what they were doing. They decided to put it into hiatus. I mean, I've never been quite sure. No one's ever told me precisely. There was this rumour that someone wanted to make a film of it, and that they didn't want it then on the telly if they were going to do it. That never happened. There'd always been rumours. I think Peter Davidson had a rumour there was going to be a film of it and all that. I mean, the future now, perhaps, because Disney are now somehow connected to it, and one wouldn't be at all surprised if they're going, we could make this into a film. And there's no harm in that, really, because Star Trek has gone on to be filmed very successfully, and yet there's Star Trek still in some form or other on the television. So you can see how that kind of thing could work.
Exactly. And I think after the hiatus or the cancellation,
you
would have been well within your rights not to... I think no one would have been surprised if you didn't want to come back to it.
Well, yes, but then because I had to take over Colin's role and played it magnificently and then turn into me. I remember at the time thinking, well, no matter what happens, I will turn up for that night, that changeover. So I'd sworn to myself I would do that. And so when it came, I was also delighted to be asked to do it, to bring it back, because by then I knew we were already making Big Finish, I think, a doctor who hadn't died, and we were doing audio plays with some really good actors and great writers, and so that whole thing, and we all knew Doctor Who couldn't die because the fans wouldn't have let it, and in fact the fans brought it back. Russell T Davies was a fan. I was speaking to him the other day, and he was telling me he was 16 or 17, and he was huge fan, and he was broken hearted. So the fans, what they did was they decided to kind of sneak their way into the BBC and bring it back. So, but that was before I've jumped. There was the in-between bit with the Canadian film. Again, it was a fan. He was he was a Brit who went to America and was a producer, and he was a great fan of Doctor Who, and so he decided he wanted to bring it back, but bring it back for all of America, because when we were doing it, they have a public broadcasting system which is underfunded, a bit like ours really, but it's like dotted around. It's not spread. It's dotted around little towns and cities all over America, and it's run by local people, and they raise money to keep it going, and they get a little trickle down money to keep it going from the government. They showed Doctor Who. He wanted to show it on CBS or something, whatever the ones, big ones. So that would become a film, and that was his dream. So when they asked me to do it, and I was delighted to be part of it, to come back with it. And so I did it, really. And also, what was brilliant was I got the set I wanted. I always liked steampunk. And so it's not Colin, it's not Peter, it's not Dave. All these, so many doctors, you've got to remember all their names. It's not Paul's console, it's my console. And also I got to play the as I quite liked, which was one of the juggling balls. The character was a solitary, kind of sad, reflective Doctor, and that was nice. And in Big Finish, since then, every now and again I've got to play that Doctor, which I like as well. I like playing him.